Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring podcasts on the Blue Wire Network. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, then you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Wherever you are across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/bluewire to learn more and find a center near you. That's unified, UNIFYD, healing.com/bluewire. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including EE System.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday night, June 16th, 2024, as we record a new episode. The Chicago White Sox wrapped up their 7-game road trip out west, visiting Seattle and Arizona. They finished 2-5 as they had 2 clunkers against Arizona, but they also played one of their best games in their season in their lone win against the Diamondbacks. The big takeaway, though, is from Sunday's game. Drew Thorpe, in his second career start, got beat up. We'll discuss what went wrong for Thorpe and look ahead to his third start. The White Sox are back home briefly this week to face the Houston Astros, but they won't see their old friend, Jose Abreu, as the Astros release the former MVP. We'll preview that series and also hear from James Fegan about his visit to the White Sox Arizona Complex League. Speaking of James, he joins me now along with the managing editor of SoxMachine.com, Jim Margulis. Jim, welcome to the show. As the White Sox lose 2 out of 3 in Arizona, just really... If you didn't get a chance to watch as far as the games over the weekend because you were out with your dad celebrating Father's Day or you were being a dad, which speaking of Jim, how was your Father's Day?
It was okay. Went to a brewery. I dropped off a chair for reupholstering. Went to a farmer's market.
This sounds so dad.
Pretty solid dad day.
Aggressively dad.
Aggressively dad. That's 60 grade dadding right there.
Thank you.
Again, the White Sox lost 2 out of 3 against the Diamondbacks. Friday, they lost 7-1. Chris Flexen got beat up. Saturday, that was the game that the White Sox played some of their best baseball of the season. They won 9-2, was the largest margin of victory of the season. They hit 4 home runs. Erick Fedde was able to survive after a shaky start. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then Sunday, they lost 12-5, and it was 12-2 going into the 9th inning. The White Sox were able to score 3 more times in the top of the 9th inning to only lose by a touchdown. And that draws the focus into Drew Thorpe as making his second career start. Thorpe allowed 3 runs in the first inning. He was not able to get out of the 4th inning, but the White Sox allowed 6 runs in that inning, where Thorpe had 5 walks in his start, didn't strike anyone out. And following Thorpe was the return of Chad Kuhl, and Kuhl also struggled. He lasted 2 2/3 innings. He walked 3, struck out 3 before allowing 4 earned runs. White Sox pitchers on Sunday, 8 walks, only 6 strikeouts. The good news from Sunday is that both Tommy Pham and Andrew Vaughn both had 3 hits in the game. Now with Drew Thorpe's rough second outing, this is how the game started on Sunday. A walk, a single, a double, in which Jock Peterson tried to stretch it into a triple and was thrown out, and then a home run, and then another walk, and that base runner stole second base. So James, with Drew Thorpe, ugly outing. it's probably best that he did have a good outing in his major league debut against Seattle, because if this is how he pitched against Seattle, maybe he doesn't get a second start because there's some question whether or not he's ready for the majors. But speaking to Thorpe after the game, James, did he feel out of sorts, like he maybe wasn't ready to go against the Diamondbacks?
I don't think he put that in those terms. He said his bullpen was like okay. He felt like he was kind of getting around the issues that he eventually had in the start. But he said like, yeah, my command was terrible, and I didn't have. He also said he didn't have his best stuff, though he didn't like attribute it to anything more physically troubling than that. There was a. I don't think he cracked more than 92 on his fastball. It's always interesting when you hear about a guy who's low velocity and then somebody says like, oh, he can run it up to 94, 95. And you wonder if that's something you can see multiple times at the start, or it's like maybe something that's been seen once at some point in the year.
Got it. Yeah.
But he was very 90-91, and that's kind of what he was in Seattle. And from the way they talk, what they're kind of prepared for him to be, they think it can, play up in the right situations when he locates it up in the zone. But he just fell behind so aggressively, so much that he's really just trying to throw enough fastballs to like establish he can hit locations of things and then just throw like a ton of off speed off. I think like this first start in Seattle where he threw 38 changeups to 28 fastballs, that's kind of like the ratio he would be more comfortable at. Whereas it was worse earlier in the game when he was really falling behind, but like even just throwing it 50% of the time, like that's not the plan for him to survive. But his command was so off. And I thought it was like not as good as advertised in Seattle, but like much worse, today or, Sunday in Arizona in a way that just doesn't let him operate. And I can see, especially when he's rolling, especially what he's done in Double-A, that like when he is commanding and all the stuff he's able to do to throw off timing, and his velo separation on his changeup is so good and it mirrors his fastball so well that like once he kind of has established everything, like people aren't going to punish the fastball as much because like it's impossible to kind of get on time with it if you're seeing, changeups that look like it but are 10 miles off like over and over again. Right. But he just never was able to get to that first step and first point. And additionally, in talking to Ethan Katz and talking to Thorpe a little bit, on Saturday, the day before his start, like he's not in the best place with his slider and cutter. They're kind of blending in right now, and it's not giving him as much of his one when he would throw to lefties a bit more with the cutter going up and in, kind of Fedde style, and also just another option than just establishing his changeup. So his cutter is a little like when it is as best, and they haven't really necessarily seen it as best this year. Numbers at Double-A aside, it's kind of like a second fastball in the way it is to Fedde of like, hey, if I want to go to that glove side, I'm going to get something that's hard, like, with 88 or higher, and it's going to like get up and in on left-handers or go away from right-handers. And it's going to be a different velocity band than everything else. He doesn't really have that right now. So for him to not command his fastball, not set up his changeup to succeed, he's really kind of got nothing, as we saw. So I think like, the comparison to Fedde a little bit is that Fedde kind of has multiple ways to beat you, depending on how the game is going and depending on how it's being attacked. Thorpe theoretically has multiple ways, but one's kind of down right now. And since for him to not get off on a good foot of the other, it's kind of 0 for 2, and you don't really know how it's going to go other than, a lot of 91-mile fastballs getting hit hard.
So in order for him to get to that changeup, James, is the idea is that Thorpe, at least to start the game, is he needs the fastball to work in order to get to that point where against Seattle,
he needs to at least get to 0-1.
At least get 0-1, right? I need to throw at least one good fastball before I can just start throwing changeups at everyone. Okay, that's good to know when watching in his third start. And Jim, like when you look at Thorpe's pitch chart, I should say, and the heat map of where all the pitches fell, especially with the four-seamer, it looks like a shotgun blast. Mm-hmm. He was not able to find the outer edges of the zone. And to the point that James made, like when you are living 90 and 91 miles per hour in today's major leagues, you have to be able to live on the edges, because if you fall behind 2-0 and you try to get ahead again and you pump in a 90, 91 mile per hour fastball down the middle of the plate, you're going to get crushed.
Yeah, I think we saw probably like the best example of his command in his first inning. First professional inning against Seattle, where like the execution is really crisp. He was living on the corners. He was able to backdoor his slider to lefties and rush the fastball up and get the cutter in occasionally to expand the plate with a changeup. And then this time around, and even like later in the start in Seattle where it started to wobble on him, losing the fastball up, like you're kind of not finishing it. And so it was flying up, flying open, a lot of changeups drifting way into the right-handed batter's box, not competitive pitches, giving them a look at the changeup, giving them a look at the velocity to where maybe they could fight it off a little bit more, or, kind of understand what it looks like if they are ahead in the count and, aren't swinging when they're, when there's a slightest chance looking at out of hand that it might be changeup. Like that's kind of how it looks like hitters are reacting right now, to where, like James said, it has to be at least 0-1, unlike other pitchers who perhaps might have to get to 2 strikes to throw their best pitch. Thorpe's changeup is good enough to where like he can throw it 2 times in a row, maybe throw it 3 times in a row and not get burned on it and not feel like, well, he has to execute his best possible pitch 2 or 3 times in a row to get the result that he wants. Because with the changeup, sometimes it gets a swing and miss. Sometimes it gets like a rollover or a pop up. There are a lot of good outcomes with the changeup that maybe like a slider executed the same way or a sweeper doesn't quite get. So that's why I think like it can be that valuable of a pitch. But it almost reminded me a little bit of like watching Erick Fedde versus watching Jonathan Cannon early on with his starts, where you're looking at like movement both ways, especially lefties with that cutter. Like when Fedde's going right, it's the sweeper going right to left and the sinker or changeup going from left to right, and really being able to buy inches off the plate, either inside or outside. Cannon couldn't quite do that right away. He's getting better at that. You're seeing with the cutter and the changeup showing a little bit more activity going away from left-handed hitters. And I think with Thorpe, he's got the left to right down, and now it's a matter of right to left, going from glove side to arm side, going inside to lefties. I think that's really going to help make the plate wider, because right now I think hitters can more or less eliminate a part of the plate, or they're not worried about it. And if Thorpe's precision is not 100% on point with the cutter or with the slider, because they're kind of the same pitch right now, that they're only really zeroing in on one half of the plate or one pitch and able to take care of it.
With the White Sox being 19-54, there's no reason to panic and sound the alarm that, oh my gosh, Drew Thorpe is going to be a bust. What did we trade Dylan Cease for? No, it's not like that at all. It's just more of this discussion is what to watch when Thorpe makes his next start, which appears to be against the Detroit Tigers next weekend, as the White Sox get a chance to visit old friend Jason Benetti out in Comerica. Speaking of Erick Fedde, now Erick Fedde was in the danger zone, James. Like in the second inning, he already allowed 1 run in the first inning. There's bases loaded with 1 out, and Fedde was able to escape out of that jam, which was a great sign from Fedde. But he already allowed 5 hits at that point of the game, and after that, getting out of the jam, he only allowed 3 more hits and just 1 run, and he was able to last 6 innings. Is there anything that Thorpe could learn from Erick Fedde as far as when it comes to pitch arsenal, or be able to navigate those tricky situations where it doesn't feel like a young pitcher can drown?
Initially, I would be hard to figure out how, because they're kind of different. Thorpe is like almost like a Lucas Giolito like throwing motion, where it's like this really compact like arm action, and because of that he's more force seam and changeup oriented, and this changeup is like the velo separation. It's not the tumble and like kind of horizontal movement the way Fedde kind of throws a splitter that is mostly down, but it still has a little bit of arm side movement. But the cutter and the way they both use it, or at least the way Thorpe would want to use it, is pretty similar, and makes me think of that. And that's what, talking to Fedde like the day before his start, I was asking him, like, are you at a point where you're kind of seeing how the league is reacting to the new Fedde and starting to see different approaches? And he had said like kind of the Milwaukee start was kind of maybe when he first started to notice something, and that was a team that was like really content with singling him to death, which is somewhat rare and maybe something that coming from the KBO where they were okay with singling him to death to the majors where it's all about damage and extra base power. He hadn't seen a lot of in his first 10 to 11 starts. But there's a lot of guys like, we're not going to go into deep counts because one, this new Erick Fedde throws strikes now, the old one didn't. We're just going to fall behind. And this new Erick Fedde can miss bats, the old one didn't. We don't want to get in 2 strike counts and get like chase pitches and be wave-man sweepers and stuff like that. So they're willing to, like, if they saw something on the edges, put it in play and kind of give him a lot of traffic to deal with and see what happened. He's capable of getting ground balls from guys with that approach, as anyone in the KBO last year would tell you. And he's able to shift in that mode when, like, you know, the opportunities for strikeouts aren't really there in the way like they were like the Twins start where he had 11. So I don't know if there's specifically, I don't know if like Erick Fedde has, you know, the answer for how to get 2 miles per hour back on Thorpe's cutter and getting some more vertical action on it because it's sinking a little too much, which is how it's blending into his slider a little bit right now. But
okay.
I think that larger lesson of like having kind of different ways to attack in response to like how the team is doing, you know, that could be applicable. But something Fedde is able to do is that he's able to reach back for 93, 95 situationally. And he kind of has a bit more, you know, there are flaws to the sinker, but, you know, the fact is that he has movement behind it that on top of just like the velocity and location to it. Whereas Thorpe doesn't necessarily have elite ride and anything other than just like, yeah, if he throws a top of the zone fastball, it's hard to hit in a way that a lot of top of the zone 4-seamers are hard to hit. So Fedde's got some tools that make him a little bit less vulnerable when he's working from behind right now than Thorpe does, but he's got any tips on how to get the command and life in that cutter back, you know, that would be something, because what Thorpe has done so far is to try to make his slider like drop even more to kind of backfill the dynamic that's missing from the cutter not being as hard and firm as he is just to make the slider even kind of loopier. But have a temporary fix when you really you need that 88-mile-an-hour cutter getting on the hands of lefties to have the dynamic he wants.
Yeah, that's really interesting feedback and analysis, James. Because for Fedde, Jim, according to Fangraphs, Fedde in 15 starts is a 2-WAR pitcher, as his ERA, which is currently at 3.09, and his FIP, which is at 3.44, they're inching closer together. For someone like Fedde, Fedde's season's almost halfway done, Jim. I mean, he's currently on pace to pitch, have more than 30 starts this season. He's on pace to be a 4-WAR pitcher or better for $7.5 million. Like, this is a great signing by the White Sox. And if he does get to 4-WAR, that easily exceeds what his major league career total was before the season. But for that Saturday start, being able to get through those 2 innings, facing a lot of danger, a lot of traffic on the bases, and only allow 1 run. And when you add in the resume for his entire season so far for the White Sox, Jim, I know that there's a lot of trade chatter about Garrett Crochet, and for good reason. Crochet is the highlight reel right now with the amount of strikeouts that he's able to pile up. But I still feel like even at like a start against Arizona on Saturday, that Fedde will help a contender, and Getz is going to get plenty of text messages and calls about Fedde.
Sure seems like that. Like if Getz isn't getting, you know, maybe as many calls about Fedde as Crochet, then like something's a little bit off, or he's not making himself available to it, because they seem like 2 different pitchers, but pitchers who can accomplish the same thing. Like the strengths of Crochet are that he's like absolutely overpowering in his current form. The strengths of Fedde is that it's a little bit more set it and forget it, in terms of you don't have to worry about him surviving the grind of a full season. You don't have to worry about him, just being somebody who's, I guess what his salary is going to be next year. He knows, between his experience stateside, experience KBO, like he struggled, he succeeded, like he's experienced the whole spectrum. So I would think he would be a little bit more just open to changes of scenery, or just, if he goes from the worst team in baseball to a team in the pennant race, not really going to affect him because he's already been all over the map, literally and figuratively in his career. So I think, while his profile is unusual and that it's more of a kitchen sink approach, whereas Crochet is basically two great pitches. Teams, especially like teams that are really down in the rotation, teams that are, looking at kind of the 2020 White Sox plan of like one starter and then like, I don't know, like hoping for someone to come back. Like Fedde would help in that regard for a team, looking for postseason starters, but even for a team that's, one of the, maybe in the glut of 500 teams, like, and where every start over the course of 2 months can be valuable. He would help a lot there too. So yeah, it's fun watching him pitch. It's fun watching just his ability to, repeat in terms of like, where he's going with his specific pitches. Like I think probably the key component of that start was that strikeout of Corbin Carroll, where he did get the, I guess bogus strike three, if you're looking at Carroll's point of view, on, 3 cutters above the zone. Carroll swung at one of them, but Carroll took 2 and they were both not strikes, and strike 3 was like a bigger miss, I think, than strike 1 was. So his ability to maybe expand the zone by hitting it in the same spot over and over again might be something where Thorpe, I was looking at his pitch map because he didn't get a good strike zone from Martin Maldonado, but perhaps because he was missing so severely with pitches earlier that, the borderline pitches didn't look all that compelling either. Whereas Fedde, able to kind of poke one sore spot, I think, of a hitter's cold zone, because Carroll has been chasing kind of vulnerable up in the air. And so he just kept going back. And whether it was teasing Carroll into swinging at a pitch that was too high and then like maybe expanding the zone upwards to where like even Maldonado, not having a great framing season, not able to do it for him, or maybe it was just luck. Here's a pitch where Maldonado didn't do anything, Fedde didn't do anything. It just happened to be like a missed strike by Nick Marley that gave it to him. But being able to either make your own luck or take that luck and then just not need it the rest of the start, I think is something where Fedde is maybe the fact that he failed so much early on in his career, maybe able to separate himself a little bit, and maybe that's a case of something Thorpe just has to learn by doing, which is, learning about the margin for error. And, Fedde had a very slim one early on before he was able to expand his repertoire, and probably Thorpe has to learn the same thing in terms of, when it comes to cutter versus slider, like making your slider worse or different doesn't necessarily make your the rest of your arsenal better the way it might against AA pitchers or AA hitters, where just anything that doesn't look like the changeup is a bonus.
When it comes to pitching injuries for the contenders right now, watch Baltimore and Los Angeles Dodgers. We'll talk about the Dodgers later in the show. And yeah, we'll talk about around Major League Baseball, but the contenders are already dealing with some injuries at the top of their rotation. I still feel like Erick Fedde could be someone that you give the ball to and he starts game 3 in the postseason. He's not going to be your ace, but he's been really good. And this was a fantastic signing for the White Sox. So for a season that so much has gone wrong for the White Sox this year, they really hit it with Erick Fedde. James was in Arizona to cover the games between the White Sox and the Diamondbacks, but he also got a chance to visit the White Sox Arizona complex and get to watch some ACL, and you've seen some of those stories at SoxMachine.com. So James, who was interesting in the complex league? Who's your guy? I guess, what's that thing, Jim? People claim dibs, right? On White Sox prospects still. Like, who do you got dibs on?
ACL White Sox had this guy who only took 3 at-bats the game I was at. Absolutely huge. Dwarfed every guy on the field. Homer to left, double to right center. Line out bullet to the right field corner. Only guy with a name on his back of his jersey. Jimenez of some kind. I don't know what position will play. Doesn't move super well, but the bat is undeniable. Presuming he's not like 8 years old to the level or anything like that. The guy who like stuck out to me, I think anyone who's talking to me about this visit already knows, including Pedro Gafal, is Javier Mogollon from Venezuela. He's 18. He's listed at 5'8". I think whoever did that is being very nice. He was playing shortstop the night I saw him, but it feels like it's, given how much he kind of has to wind his little body up to like throw from shortstop, as much as like effort and precision he puts into that, it probably means it would move him to second base at some point in his career, at which point he'll have to really hit. His numbers right now, he's probably got like an over 40 strikeout rate, whereas previously, and I even like in my list of questions I read out, I was going off the BA write-up of him because he had cracked the top 30 going into this year based on how he'd done in the DSL, was that he was a hit over power guy. And, I could see that by looking at him. He's a very small man, but he's also like, I remember the contrast that people put to like when there are comps between like, hey, Jose Altuve is short, and why can't Nick Madrigal be kind of a similar player? And it's like Jose Altuve's like upper body is built very differently from Nick Madrigal. And I'm not putting a Jose Altuve camp on Mogollon, but he's got Popeye like forearms, not unlike the parted Popeye Rodriguez, but he's got like this big, very built upper body for an 18-year-old for sure, and especially for a guy who's probably like 5'6". He's been hitting. I saw him, hit a double off the wall. His power numbers in the ACL this year are, good. I think he's got like 4 home runs. He has 4, and Angelo Hernandez, the catcher, has 5, or flip flop. Both of them have been hitting for pop in that league so far. That a league that doesn't really have much pop, which is why you see a lot of like when there is a double, it like goes over someone's head because the outfielders are playing shallow and a bunch of chaos results. But he's striking out like a lot right now. He's no longer hit for power. But previous to BA write-up with him was that he was this no stride swing, which allowed him to make a ton of contact. Now he's got like the biggest stride I've ever seen, where he's like taking this like huge leg kick because of how it is. It looks like he's lifted his knee up to his ears the way he's doing it. It gets a little smaller with 2 strikes, but it's like someone decided like, let's flip this profile entirely, because now he's hitting for pop, but his contact is not there. The hope would be that because he had the feel for contact before this, that he'll kind of acclimate as time goes on, like especially the 18-year-old, especially in this league. These guys are kind of like, this is the first time in a lot of these guys' career that they're being asked to make a significant mechanical change, and put it to work in the season. And they see their numbers kind of go up and down and haywire as a result as they're figuring it out. And sure enough, I talked to Mogollon on the next day after watching him play. He's like, yeah, maybe doing this for about a week. And I was like, okay, that would explain a little bit how you're kind of feeling this out. So I saw him reach base 4 times. And then I talked to him that day, and the next he goes out that night and he goes over 4 Ks. And so like, yeah, there's a bit of an up and down with how he's going right now. But he thinks it's allowing him to recognize spin a lot better and getting loaded in that way. He feels like he's seeing the ball better, even if he seems like he's still figuring out, the contact element of it. There's a lot of things about him that are like exciting to watch right now. He's just running like as hard as he can. Like think like Tommy Pham, but like his house is on fire type of like running style. And that's like Mogollon, and against ACL defenses, like that's a great idea. And it leads to extra bases a lot of the time. He is kind of similarly wired on defense, and it looks cool, but it also clearly like is a tool to make up for like the fact that like he's probably an average runner, maybe a little above at this point. But as he gets bigger, you'd think he'd settle into an average runner. But he's got short little legs. He's trying to cover a lot of ground, so he's darting around like really high effort. It's easier to separate yourself with that sort of energy. Not that there's like a ton of loafers in ACL, but at that level of precision in the game, just putting pressure on the defense gives you so much more returns than it would be at the higher levels. And I don't know if the pop will play as much. I think his forearms, while they stand out in the ACL, I think pretty much everyone in the Major League clubhouse has that level of forearms. But it's a really fun player to kind of get behind and see like how far can he drag this. Just trying to see like how much sweat equity can he throw and overcome the some of the limitations that just come from his size and some of the offensive issues he's trying to work through right now. His manager, why am I blanking on his name? Loves him since I just shook his hand last night because he was at the White Sox game. But yeah, he even said like he's got too many tools, like he's overflowing with like stuff and ideas and energy. So I think he's pretty well liked. Danny Gonzalez. Sorry, Danny. Um, he's just kind of like a fun little project. I think it's, the safe thing would be like to slap a utility profile on him, because that's just like a more reasonable thing to do. He's a 75K signing. He was not like a big part of the international class, but he's got himself this far. I think he's pretty fun to watch.
The White Sox need some of those success stories for the guys they sign under 100,000, because that's been one of my complaints, James, for recent years, that the White Sox don't exhaust all of their international spending, and it looks like that might be happening again with the previous international class. And it's, why not? If you can get 16-year-olds from Venezuela, Dominican Republic, for those types of players for $50, $75, $100,000 signing bonus, why not spend all the money? And I've always wondered if it was just a matter of they don't have enough targets, or people don't want to sign with the White Sox, which any opportunity, if it's worthwhile for those teenagers, I would think they would take it, especially for those that are maybe not as heralded as the top prospects that get millions and millions of dollars on the international side. Now, you mentioned Eloy. Do we got an update on Eloy? When will he return to the White Sox?
Not something super precise, but if he's playing games like this week, you could theoretically send him to Charlotte for a week, starting his next week. One thing that like Grifol said is that it's not really so much about his timing at the plate as much as like how he ran. And so like I saw his timing at the plate look pretty good, but he didn't, he wasn't high effort on his double, and the other one he trotted on. Like he seemed very much like, not like he was trying to dip back into his legs and get some burst and couldn't find it. It was more like, this is my first game back, I'm going to take it easy. I'm not trying to like, it seemed like he had been told like, take some swings, jog around out there, don't go crazy. It seemed to be the protocol he was on. So it was great to see him. It looks like he's loose enough to like jog around and play, and obviously not be in his comfort, but I didn't necessarily see him and see like, all right, he could have an infield single tomorrow and be fine, because that didn't seem like what he was doing just yet. He seemed pretty gingerly as far as how he's moving around. I would think moving to Charlotte should be something that happens fairly soon. I don't know what the big barrier would be between DHing him there and DHing him in Charlotte. So moving him there this week, and maybe seeing him next week after that in Chicago seems like a reasonable timeline, but they haven't officially stamped that and confirmed it in any way.
Got it. Well, we're going to take a quick word from our sponsors. We'll preview the upcoming White Sox series as the marketing and stadium operations team. They have to put away their welcome back Jose Abreu videos, as the White Sox old friend was released. We'll share our reaction to that news. The MLB Draft Combine is this week, and we'll check around Major League Baseball next on the Sox Machine podcast. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices in the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. The Chicago White Sox are back home this week with the Houston Astros visiting. Weather looks great, might be better than the baseball actually being played, but with promotional nights like Pride Night on Tuesday, June 18th, and Teacher Appreciation Day on Thursday, June 20th, use Game Time to grab your tickets. You can currently find deals as low as $17 a ticket for the upcoming series. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. The White Sox are home briefly. They have 3 games against the Houston Astros. After this series, which is Tuesday and Thursday, they have a getaway day as they play on Thursday afternoon. They go to Detroit to face the Tigers. That's the first time they've seen the Tigers since the opening series of this season, and boy, have things changed for both sides for that upcoming weekend series. We'll preview that series later this week before the White Sox welcome back home a lengthier homestand with the Dodgers, the Braves for a game, and the Colorado Rockies to end the month of June. But against this Houston Astros team, this is going to be an intriguing series. The Astros are 33-39, and they seem stuck in place right now. They're currently third place in the American League West. They're 9 games back of Seattle. More concerning, they're 6.5 games back of the wild card. So they're not really close to the postseason as we inch closer to the halfway point of the 2024 season. They won their last game, but in their last 10 games, they're 5-5, and they are not a good road team. They're 14-20 this year away from Houston. And I guess part of the reason why the Astros have been struggling, there's a lot of struggles for this team. But the big news before the weekend, Jose Abreu, the 2020 American League MVP, and of course, well-loved by White Sox fans, he was released by the Houston Astros. He's owed $19.5 million for this season and next season, so it's a ton of money on the books for the Astros. It was not a good season for Abreu. He hit 124. His slugging percentage was 195 in 35 games this season with 2 homers and 7 RBIs. His weighted runs created plus was 2. So he was 98% below league average as a hitter, and his WAR total, according to Fangraphs, was -1.5, and this comes off the heels of his worst season as a professional in 2023 when he slugged just 383 and had an 86 weighted runs created plus. Jim, we had a feeling when Abreu assigned this big deal with the Houston Astros, like our initial thinking was good for Jose. He got a lot of money. It was no way the White Sox were going to match that. The Astros overspent. Jeff Bagwell was a big part of this signing. And 2 years later, this is a lot of money on the books for the Astros, a team that's almost drowning right now and at risk of missing the playoffs this year. And they owe Abreu a lot of money next year. It's crazy to see just how far Abreu has fallen off, and it's gotten to this point that he is a casualty of being released midseason.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think for a guy like Abreu who built up so much goodwill in Chicago to go to Houston and then be somewhat emblematic of either a culture war or just a rift between the way the Astros did business and the way they wanted to do business. Last year I was bearish on the Astros because, I thought the vibes were off. Like Jim Crane struck me a little bit like a Jerry Jones type, wanting to be the guy, tired of other people getting credit, whether it's Jeff Lunau or James Click, and just wanting to be, the reason why the Astros are winning. Brings in Jeff Bagwell. They start making big moves for important, big names, run producers. I guess you'd call Abreu a run producer versus somebody like who's had recently shown as of like 2022 that he was a great hitter. Like he was a good hitter, kind of okay, but trending on maybe collapse with his power dipping and some signs for real concern. And the average annual value that he signed for, around $20 million a year, that didn't seem off. You saw like Edwin Encarnacion getting like $12 million for his last year because of like the power he was able to provide until he suddenly didn't. Like that was a fair amount going year to year for somebody like Encarnacion, and then somebody's left holding the bag. But to go for like 3 years for Abreu, that was odd. And to see like Crane and Bagwell like championing it while there was no GM, that struck me as just a little bit of, this seems like it could be regrettable. And, Dana Brown then gets hired afterwards. And, you're seeing it right now with like the Astros, both on the pitching side and the hitting side, because Justin Verlander, his health has been like a little bit off, and now he was scratched with a neck problem, and they really need a boost with the rotation because they missed Javier. Valdez having a down year. They need like a boost from somewhere. And then Verlander taking a step back this year, not being, looking 41 years old, which, he has the right to look 41 years old, just as Abreu had the right to look like he was 37. But, when you're counting on both these guys to, step up and be, if not MVPs, at least, have really, really smooth declines that, give you glimpses of that form while ultimately like being healthy and good. Flawed plan. And the White Sox, while they promised that, or at least, Jerry Reinsdorf and Abreu really seemed to have this really informal, ill-advised relationship when it came to business in a zero-sum game. Like, you shouldn't be promising like never wearing a jersey of other teams or signing yourself. That seems like it could end poorly. The White Sox had to untangle that first base DH situation, and letting Abreu go was the only thing that could really, that was like the most direct way, shortest possible route to like giving Andrew Vaughn playing time his natural position and letting Eloy Jimenez not have to play the outfield, and same thing with Gavin Sheets, whoever's healthy at the time. It's always Gavin Sheets to answer that question. But like now the Astros had that same thing with, Abreu not hitting, and then like Singleton being better than him, and Lou Perfido needing someplace to hit. Like, he created the same problems with the Astros that he didn't create with the White Sox, but just that, there are always guys who can hit and need somewhere to play. And so Abreu, being the worst of the hitters, became the guy on the outside looking in, versus with the White Sox, he was always the best. So it's, it's unfortunate that, because he didn't really earn that goodwill with the Astros, and because there was this whole identity crisis at the time he was signed, that he became the figure for everything that's wrong with the way the Astros are operating, because I think he's probably too dignified or distinguished of a major league player to be subject to that kind of like just pettiness or amateurism on the part of what the Astros are trying to do. But at least he's getting compensated. Like, there are some I think, job titles where, part of what you get paid for is being the one criticized when ultimately other people are the ones responsible. In this case, like, Abreu is not the one. He didn't sign himself the way he signed himself or said he was going to sign himself with the White Sox. But ultimately, it's kind of like the same end result, to where like, I signed myself, so I'm going to get criticized, and that's okay, because like ultimately, like, I'm being paid a little bit more and a little bit beyond maybe what my trend line said I should be paid. But there are emotions involved too, and reputations, and it is a shame that he's the one who ultimately has to pay. And I'm kind of hoping that he gets like this Albert Pujols like second act or third act with another team, after he's done disappointing his current team. But we'll see. We'll see if he wants to do it, or see if, Albert Pujols wasn't as bad with the Angels as Abreu has been with the Astros. But, there's always a chance for a bounce back, one last hurrah, and it'd be cool if he got one.
Well, to that point, Pujols had his last hurrah, James, with the St. Louis Cardinals. What are the odds, James? Is Abreu coming back?
I would be surprised, but also I cover the White Sox for now 7 seasons, and surprise is the name of the game. I talk to coaches and front office people, and they would give me a certain impression, but who I don't talk to very often is Jerry Reinsdorf, and he'd be the person who would power that on through. So really, I don't know. I don't think so. Kind of talking to like people like in passing, like the idea is that like for Brady to actually go on the IL for his back late last season was probably more like the tip of the iceberg on how much it's been bothering him over the last couple of years of his career. So I would imagine that there's kind of like a more building of physical limitations rather than like this overnight, oops, I like dropped my hitting ability while I was texting and it fell in the toilet, and now I can't get it back ever again. So I think not that any roster is suited to like take on a first baseman who's hitting 120, but like certainly the White Sox don't have room for another first baseman or are geared to a win now project. So it'd be very much like, putting a hood ornament on a car that you're taking to the junkyard right now. But I would think it's more likely he retires than I think him getting like another major league stance. But like obviously he's accomplished a lot, so somebody might be crazy, and certainly this org is as crazy as any. I don't think so, but maybe I'm using too much logic.
Well, if the White Sox don't bring back Eloy Jimenez next year, and if they're trying to gain a wider audience for their new television network that they're launching, maybe I don't think it's happening this season. Maybe next year. To James' point, wouldn't surprise me if Jerry Reinsdorf just wakes up one morning. You know what I'm gonna do, Chris? I'm gonna help you out. I'm gonna sign Jose Abreu for you. So maybe it's not over quite yet. For this series, the pitching probables, again, the Astros, a bit of disarray. They don't know who's going to be starting in this series. They're going to try to figure that out, at least manager Joe Espada on Monday with a day off to line up the pitching rotation. But the White Sox do. So Tuesday night and Wednesday night, these are 7:10 p.m. Central Time starts. It's going to be hot in Chicago. First pitch temperatures could be 89 degrees for both of these games. Jonathan Cannon will get the first game of this series, followed by Garrett Crochet on Wednesday, and then getaway day be 83 degrees and sunny. That is the right now forecast in Chicago. Chris Flexen will have the getaway day for the White Sox as he tries to bounce back from the Diamondback series. James, you got a chance to chat with Brian Bannister, the director of pitching for the Chicago White Sox, over the weekend. And he seems pretty high on Jonathan Cannon. Not just like, yeah, he had a good start against Seattle. Like, he sees a lot of potential in Cannon. What is Bannister seeing from Cannon that he believes he could stick as a major league starter?
I think he's clearly just overcome by handsomeness. He kept referring to how tall he was and how he's a big body. Seems like he's just smitten, but I think he sees like, well, we might see John Cannon like throwing 7 pitches and be like, pick a lane, weirdo. I think Bannister's like, this guy really can manipulate the baseball and do different things and change things up, and probably will respond to teaching, and when I ask him to change a grip, he'll be able to do it because he's already fiddling so much on his own. So their big thing is that they think they've supercharged Jonathan Cannon's changeup. They think they've added a couple inches of drop to it, and now he has more of a legitimate attack plan against lefties. They're already pretty comfortable with how he is against righties and how his sinker plays. He actually has altered his sinker as well. He's previously talked about like he kind of feels like he does better in later innings when he's not throwing as hard. He's adjusted the grip now. Now he throws it as hard as hell. And so maybe we'll see more. He can get up to 95, 96 with his four-seamer. Maybe we'll see more 94, 95 with the sinker a little bit. And, obviously he has a sweeper. He can throw to right-handers. He has his cutter. There's a lot of stuff he can do with that. But they really feel like, one, that he was getting a little better, at least when he came up and faced Boston and certainly Seattle. There's more signs of that he was getting a little better about commanding the four-seamer up in the zone of lefties. But they feel like the changeup is less of a show-me change, less of a pure velocity separation thing, but something that has like its own diving action that has to be accounted for in the way. And as he's wont to do, he threw out a Logan Webb comparison. He likes talking about Logan Webb. I would too if I were him, but he sees like a similar type of action that they've created with this changeup recently. Cannon says he had it in Seattle. Obviously, Seattle start was good. I think Jim posted the breakdown of like the contact profile on it. It was a lot of like, good thing this is at T-Mobile rather than like, I don't know, Charlotte. But is at least an initial sign that like he's a bit more composed and a bit more comfortable with his weapons and comfortable with his plan of attack. I mean, lefties had like a 1,500 OPS about him when he went down, and he's clearly better than that with how he's been since he's returned. I know Cannon is like, from talking to him today, it's like all in on Bannister. Like, this is his guy he goes to. He really trusts him. So I think it's a very when it's a typical artist meets clay romance between the two of them. And Cannon definitely has like typical starter frame, renowned for command throughout the minors and can throw in the mid-90s. Like, there's not really any like, as much as I'm high on Drew Thorpe long term, even after I watched today, there's not like these like built-in deficiencies you have to build around, like, all right, he can do all these things well, but he's not going to throw it super hard. He throws it pretty hard. Even if, probably by the end of Jonathan Cannon's career, maybe 96 will be below average, but he's got like all these tools. It just hasn't popped in bat missing at any point before this. So if they think they can tweak things and add a couple inches of movement to his pitches and make them harder mid-season, yeah, let's go. It's more entertaining profile than the veteran starters that they've put in, and hoping that they can have trade value.
Yeah, Cannon's going to be tested on the left-handed front. He'll be having to face Yordan Alvarez in that opening game. So we'll see how Cannon's new game strategy, his new grips, we'll see if he's able to take advantage of Alvarez using that power changeup that James just explained. Jim, Garrett Crochet is getting the ball on Wednesday, and he was dominant against Seattle. We had Sox Machine live, so we pre-gamed that game. We didn't get a chance to recap and talk about Crochet's performance. We had a feeling he could be really good against Seattle following just how successful the White Sox starters were in that series. Crochet dominated with just 2 pitches, the fastball and the cutter. Is that sustainable, Jim? Can this be his new game plan moving forward?
I think so. Like, I think it's like Carlos Rodon. Like, when Carlos Rodon was at his best, he had 2 pitches. Sometimes it acted like 3 because he could change the power on his slider to be a little bit more of a little bit more sweep, or like downward break versus like a hard, going from like 84 to 88 or 89, 90 with the slider, depending on like how much power he wanted to put behind it. But it was really 2 pitches. And I think with Crochet, like, he's shown the ability to execute other pitches. Like, he's shown the ability to hit both sides of the plate. He's shown the ability to like throw backdoor sliders, more of a sweepier slider to some effect until hitters started finding it out. And then he just changed it. Like, he just realized, oh, that's not working. This is working. James has detailed this, and Crochet's been very open about it, like with the confidence of, I can tell people how I'm doing it and they won't be able to hit it, which I think is very refreshing. It's cool to be on the outside and see somebody who's such an open book and not feel like, there's a man behind the curtain. It's like, no, I'm going to throw hard fastballs. I'm going to throw cutters in, and what are you going to do about it? And when it looks that simple, I think it just reveals the power of the arsenal, and there's really no mystery to it. And so, yeah, I think for the time being, it works really well. And I think he's shown enough variety when it comes to his ability to work both sides of the plate, ability to change speed somewhat with the slider, that if he does have to somehow go back to the slider, he probably can. But right now, he's just showing the ability to make it very simple. And I think that's probably what you want. I think while it's cool to see Erick Fedde do this kitchen sink approach and throw 4 pitches roughly equal amounts and toggle them based on what's working a given day, I do think there's something just very, I think what most pitchers would want is to be Garrett Crochet and throw like really hard fastballs and really sharp cutters and not have to think too much. And I think Crochet himself would not want to think too much. Like, I think he's, based on James' reporting, he's enjoying thinking more about it, just as like finding it interesting. But ultimately, like, he's somebody who kind of came into the league with very primitive tools that worked really well, and he's kind of going back to that as the fastball is really good, but also this cutter is that pitch he needed. That's more of just going from like next gen Matt Thornton with a great fastball and like a slider that's just good enough to being 2 pitches that are above average on their own. I think that's what he's wanted all along, and now he's got it, so he doesn't really need to make it more complicated than that.
We'll see how Crochet does against the Houston Astros. Again, we'll recap that series in our next podcast, which we'll record that Thursday night after the White Sox and Astros conclude their 3-game series before the White Sox head to Detroit to face the Tigers. Quick news around Major League Baseball. This week is the Major League Baseball Draft Combine. Believe it or not, we're just a month away. Sunday, July 14th is the first round of the Major League Baseball Draft. So starting on June 18th through the 23rd at Chase Field is the MLB Draft Combine. So there's going to be drills. Tuesday night, there's going to be a prep game, a high school game. That'll be fun to watch. And the big thing for the teams, and something that I've learned from our best friend Jim Callis over at MLB.com, and he'll be part of the coverage on MLB Network, is that the interview process is really important for these major league teams getting a chance to sit down and interview the top prospects. According to MLB.com's top 200 draft prospects, 171 of those prospects will be participating at the draft combine. And from a White Sox point of view, Connor Griffin will be there. Bryce Renier will be there. Those are the two top prep players that the White Sox are considering at pick number 5. You got West Virginia's J.J. Weatherholt. For those that are interested, the local kid, Ryan Sloan, out of York High School in Elmhurst, Illinois, will be part of the draft combine. For those that are not going to be part of the draft combine, is because they're currently in Omaha right now, as the College World Series is still ongoing. The big highlight, well, there's a couple. The games have been close. It's been great drama to start the College World Series. The first 2 games ended on a walk-off, which is awesome to see. And the first 3 games were all one-run games. Christian Moore, Tennessee. So this previous week on SoxMachine.com, I previewed the College World Series. I listed 3 players that are really raising their draft stock. North Carolina's Vance Honeycutt, he had a walk-off hit. Tennessee's Christian Moore, and Florida State's James Tibbs. Christian Moore was the first player since like the 1950s in the College World Series to hit for the cycle against Florida State. And he's putting up such incredible exit velocity numbers that there are some believing that they're playing with the super bouncy ball right now in Omaha, where Christian Moore is consistently producing exit velocities greater than 110 miles per hour. Even with the dead metal bats they use in the college game, it's impressive to see that type of exit velocity. So, again, the draft combine this week for those that are interested in the MLB draft, and of course the College World Series. Jack Caglione of Florida continues to be mocked to the White Sox. That's another player you can watch as the Gators are still in Omaha. All right, moving over to Around Major League Baseball as we do for our early week podcast, just checking in and how everything's going around the league so the White Sox don't kill our joy of the sport. Big news out of Los Angeles. The Dodgers getting some bad injury news. Mookie Betts was hit by a pitch. He now has a fractured hand, so he's going to be missing some time. And their rookie pitcher, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, has a strained rotator cuff. He only lasted 2 innings against Kansas City. In his previous start against the Yankees, he pitched 7 scoreless innings against that powerful Yankees lineup, and he's got a 2.92 ERA in 14 starts. The Dodgers have some breathing room in the National League West, but if they want to challenge the Phillies to have home field advantage in the postseason, maybe they're a team that makes a move before the deadline, depending on the news on Yamamoto. And my fun fact, Paul DeJong in the last 15 days has the second most home runs in Major League Baseball. He's got 6 homers in the last 15 days. Only Baltimore's Anthony Santander has more. He has 7 in the last 15 days. I thought that was pretty interesting. So, James, I'll pass it over to you. What is catching your attention around Major League Baseball?
I mean, I feel like a narrow window we can get into a lot is being like, well, this team's guys got hurt, so maybe they'll want to trade for a White Sox player. But certainly, like the Michael Harris getting a grade 2 hamstring strain in Atlanta, kind of the only underscores their need for an outfielder. They're not someone who could necessarily have the prospect system to afford Luis Robert, but they could probably afford Tommy Pham.
So Harris is now hurt. So they got Ronald Acuna. He's out.
And Harris has a grade 2 hamstring strain as of this week.
So is Adam Duvall playing center?
I would imagine. I haven't gotten that far into looking around baseball, but I just saw that Harris was hurt and that they're now like batted like Jared Kelenic leadoff the other day. So like they're kind of stripped down to the studs in terms of their outfield depth in the way that
they can use Tommy. Yeah.
I think often we can be a little bit like what are they really going to get valuable for 2 months of X player. DJ Hurst struck out 13 Marlins this weekend for the Nationals. He was traded for 2 months of Heimer Candelario. That's not too different from some of the veteran position player pieces that the White Sox will be hawking. I'd probably value Candelario more than Paul DeJong, but a premium position, and as much as his hit profile is really weird, and I don't know how much I'd like trust anybody who has 75 strikeouts and 9 walks. Like, as he said, he's been one of the most productive power hitters in the league right now. Like, something he's doing is working, even if he's like on the bleeding edge as far as like the amount of contact you can make and be a viable hitter, but he's doing it. So I think, like, as much as like I would like to see more competitive baseball and talking post-game clubhouses where the music's on, or just in general think providing an entertaining product day in, day out to your customers is worthwhile, or simply just means that beat writers have their mom text them less often and discussed. Some of these like rental trades can produce like meaningful value or really interesting projects going forward. So I would imagine Chris Getz and company would be inclined to sell what they can, especially in a market where there are relatively few sellers.
Well, Edgar Caro, right? I mean, that's where the White Sox got Caro last year.
That's a better example than DJ Hers, is Edgar Caro winning like Southern League Player of the Week and slugging like 900 this month when he was traded for a not great month of Lucas Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez.
Yeah. So that'd be great for the White Sox. And I forgot Kyle Bradish is also hurt for Baltimore. They're keeping an eye on Bradish, who caused Pedro Grifol to call out the team's effort with his outstanding start against the White Sox just a few weeks ago. So
what an incredible impact on the White Sox season he has had.
He sure has. Jim, how about you? What's catching your attention around Major League Baseball?
Mariners are kind of running away with the AL West, and having watched them up close, it's like, are they that good to be 8.5 games up? Or is just the rest of the division not really posing a threat? But when you look at the American League, like, it's better than the National League. I think we can all agree based on the way the wild card race is unfolding. But the thing is, like, with the Orioles, and every time they have somebody hurt, are they going to trade? Are they finally going to trade one of their coveted position prospects for a White Sox player? And then you look at where they are, and they're trailing the Yankees right now in the AL East, but they're up 7 games with the first wild card spot. And even like the Royals and Twins are good teams and playing well, but like once you get past the Red Sox, you get into that National League problem of just having a bunch of mediocre teams kind of punching each other around. So I think like the Orioles, like they could probably wait as long as possible to figure out what they need for the remainder of the season, because I don't think they're going to feel like the Blue Jays are going to threaten their spot in terms of getting into October. Same thing with like the Royals and Twins. Like, Twins are getting hot, and it's hard to tell how much of that is Royce Lewis and how much of that is facing the Rockies and A's in back-to-back series. The Royals and Twins kind of look as good as their opponents aren't, and they kind of have similar records against teams above 500. Although the Royals have had some fascinating wins, I guess against the Yankees and such. Like they've fared okay, and I think they're proving that they're not like a paper tiger, but also they're just I think they're getting a lot out of Sal Perez, who's kind of, he has these moments where like, is he going to finish the rest of the season? And he's so tough, he bounces back just okay, but he has these occasional reminders of like how many miles he's logged, and so that makes me a little bit concerned. And like the Twins, kind of the same way, like when Royce Lewis is cooking, like they look really good, but Royce Lewis often gets hurt. So how much can you count on that? So those 3 teams being like pretty good wild card teams right now, being pretty secure, makes me wonder how much the White Sox having these players to trade. I think they're still going to have to sit on their hands basically until second half of July to have some movement, because the NL is so amorphous with like which teams are actually good. And the American League teams, which are better, are probably secure enough to where they don't have to feel desperate and just trade anybody for anybody, hoping to get like above average or even average production out of a position that just got hurt. They can probably wait it out and really make conscious decisions, even if they're just all kind of crapshoots for 2 months, into trying to figure out like who's the best fit. The other thing, watching the Astros cut Abreu, watching the Rockies kind of have this really tough decision with Chris Bryant. Like, they're all kind of go back to Andrew Benintendi a little bit, watching, these teams wrestle with dead money. I don't think the White Sox are anywhere close to making any decision on Benintendi, but other teams are wrestling with it. So it's always worth watching just how they do it. A little bit easier with Abreu and having 1.5 years left. But Bryant, I think, is a situation I'm watching because there's just no good ending there. And it's just a matter of how attached the Rockies are, because that's another case of the Rockies trading Nolan Arenado and that looking like a mistake, and then them rushing back to acquire Chris Bryant, who, if they never traded Nolan Arenado, they would not have had to acquire Chris Bryant. And Arenado had an opt-out, so it's a little bit different, but still, it's clear case of ownership making a decision not on the soundest baseball terms, and everybody there having to live with it until they decide they can't.
Well, we'll see what happens and unfolds this week in Major League Baseball. If you get aggravated watching the White Sox, a great series this week is going to be the Baltimore Orioles playing at the Yankees in the Bronx. That's going to be a big series for the division. The Orioles are just a game and a half back of the Yankees, so maybe there'll be a change in who's leading the American League East, but the Yankees have been great at home this year. The Yankees are 22-10 at home, but the Orioles are 22-10 on the road. So if you're someone that likes to have two screens up watching baseball, maybe the Yankees and Orioles get the main screen. At least those games will be starting before the White Sox and Astros play. But again, Wednesday night's going to be a good game, I think, for White Sox fans, with Garrett Crochet getting the ball against the Houston Astros. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could also listen to the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine, and you can click the subscribe button and get all of our podcasts and videos there as well. You can follow us on social media. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow James Fegan at JR Fegan, and you can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. If you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Thank you to our Patreon supporters. We were able to send James out to Arizona this past weekend, and he did awesome work, and we'll continue to see those stories from his trip visiting Arizona and covering those road games for the White Sox. Jim, later this week, you will be in Birmingham, sir.
Yes, Rickwood Classic released MILB at Rickwood, kind of rebranded this year to be serving the purpose of the Rickwood Classic, which was every year the Barons would play a game at Rickwood Field in Birmingham, 100 park that's been around since 1910. Hosted the Birmingham Barons and the Birmingham Black Barons, a very vital location for baseball, both in Negro Leagues and also during the heyday of the Birmingham Barons, before I guess the expansion and such, where minor league teams weren't as much of the minor leagues, back in the 40s, 50s, they used to have an insane amount of talent because of how few teams there were. And so Barons were one of the premier teams, continue to be one of the premier teams of minor league baseball. But Rickwood Field was the site of some of the best minor league baseball around, along with Negro Leagues baseball. So it's cool to see that it's getting this kind of the showcase. I'd been wanting to go to Rickwood Field since I moved to Nashville, and then the pandemic happened. It tabled the Rickwood Classic for years, but now I'm hoping with this game coming back, and I'm sure that the stadium's been transformed in dramatic ways, but I'm hoping even after this year, assuming that they move on and find a different site to play this kind of showcase game, that the Rickwood Classic will still be back and the Barons will play there every year. But really looking forward to it. That's happening Tuesday. Just got the credential today. Really looking forward to being there.
Yeah, and again, thank you to our Patreon supporters. You guys make that happen. Again,
Absolutely.
We just have monthly plans starting at $5, and we have other tiers of support where you get additional benefits. Go to patreon.com/Sox Machine and sign up today. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
For the ones who know safety isn't a catchphrase, it's a culture. And the ones who help make sure everyone makes it home safe. For the safety-minded who watch everyone's backs, Grainger offers supplies and solutions for every industry, as well as safety assessments and training to keep your facilities safe and your people safer. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.